on your knees, dog. All hail. Bow down to the king.
Singing hallelujah, let the whole world know he is king, he is Lord. He has loosed the chains of sin and death to free us. He is king.
Hail to the king.
All right, let's celebrate life.
King, 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 king. I'm king of the north, they call me the king, 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 king. I'm king of the north.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the ROKER RAPPORT podcast, again with me, Josh Wilkinson, although I do think Alex McCain will be back next week in the chair. I think it's fair to say it's been another eventful week on Wearside, and really another positive one. It started in the week with an away visit to Rochdale, a team who at the time had the same record as us, with 1 win and 2 draws from the opening 3 games, so by no means was it guaranteed 3 points. We managed to follow on from our win against Portsmouth, however, with another 2-1 win, and all of a sudden, things were starting to look a little bit brighter. Then, relentless as the EFL schedule is, there was another game in no time. This time, a home game against Wally Downs' Wimbledon, a team who many had tipped to be relegation strugglers before a ball had even been kicked, and their solitary point before Saturday's game suggested that they might be right. And really, we just added salt to their wounds with a fairly comfortable 3-1 victory on the day, courtesy of a hat-trick from the king, Chris Maguire. And now I'd like to introduce you to the other voices you'll be hearing for the next hour or so. We have another exciting debutant in Neil Graney. How are you, Neil?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah,
Excited to be on?
definitely, yeah.
Good
yeah.
stuff. And next, we have a ROKER RAPPORT veteran in relative terms. They say his legs have gone, but if anything, it's his back he should be worried about. It's Craig Chapman. How are you, Craig?
Very well, yeah.
Feeling good?
Back, not so great.
Well,
For anyone who's seen me, I'm the idiot who was on crutches yesterday at the match. So, but other than that, I'm very well.
and our special guest this week is ITV sport correspondent Simon O'Rourke. Welcome back to the podcast, Simon. How are you?
Absolutely delighted to be here, absolutely, and especially in a good week like this as well. It's nice to have nice things to talk about.
Exactly. So we'll try to keep things in time order, if you like. So we'll start with the Rochdale game. Lineup was exactly the same as the Pompey game, barring, of course, the forced absence of McNulty, who was replaced by Wyke. Were you happy with that, Craig? It was kind of expected, really, wasn't it?
I think it was probably, in terms of the lineup, you couldn't have really changed it. We're gathering a little bit of momentum now. So why, kind of upset that? Why change anything when it's not due? Lineup really was as expected. I think after the Portsmouth game, a lot of people said Ledbetter looked quite leggy, looked a little bit tired. So the reality was I thought he would likely come out for McGee or Dobson, but other than that, absolutely spot on.
And you fellas?
Charlie White looks different, is different. Has had a pre-season, that kind of thing. He was the obvious person to slot in for McNulty and that kind of thing. I found it interesting that Jack Ross didn't start the season with Grant Ledbetter in midfield, but it didn't take him long to get him back there. And so, yeah, whilst I appreciate exactly what you said there about him possibly being a bit leggy, he's pretty much going to play him at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, that was something we talked about when we had Collins on the show, Danny Collins. Obviously, he was made club captain and wasn't playing, which we found quite interesting. But obviously, I mean, I'm not saying we had anything to do with Ledbetter coming back in. Not saying Jack Ross was listening and thought, excellent point, fellas. But yeah, I think it's good to have the captain on the pitch, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think he's probably, I haven't been through everyone's squad in League One, but he's probably the most experienced player in League One. He's kind of a safety valve there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So our first goal of the game was scored by McGeady. Some real quality build-up, I think, for the goal, involving Gooch and O'Nien on the right-hand side. Stuck away by Aiden, who was somehow given acres of space in the box. There were times last season, and I've mentioned the Scunthorpe game at home quite a lot, but I'm going to mention it again. There were times last season when we scored some real quality goals, and we had a bit of a swagger to our play. And I think this was another one of them. So I'm going to put this one to you, Neil. Did you look at that goal and when we had 3 or 4 players involved in the build-up, did you think that we're getting our swagger or our confidence back a bit?
I think so, yeah. If you look at there was the first goal away at Accrington, it was similar kind of that interplay down the wing and the finish. So yeah, I think the swagger was there. I think that the funny thing about the Rochdale goal was that it was actually against the run of play. Up until then, we were pretty awful. In terms of being on the ball, possession. But yeah, I think that kind of interplay is what he's trying to do, to get around the full-backs, get behind kind of defences and kind of supply the strikers from there. But I saw that as kind of a small amount at Rochdale, but not necessarily for extended periods. I think overall Rochdale were perhaps the better team over the 90 minutes. But as good teams generally do, they win games when they're not playing so well. So
what did you make of the Rochdale performance then? Given obviously we've gone from beating Portsmouth, which was a huge result at the time and one that was definitely needed. Did you think we took that confidence into that game, or did we still look a bit suspect?
I was surprised, and I think the team was surprised at how kind of confident Rochdale were on the ball. They played this kind of style where the keeper was dropping it at his feet and playing to his centre halves, and we seemed to not be able to deal with that. We're either kind of taken aback by that approach, or we just couldn't deal with it for the first half an hour or so, and the goal kind of helped. But obviously we then conceded as we do, and it's back to square one. But I think it looked. I mean, I was surprised, but it looked as though the team was fairly taken aback about Rochdale's approach and their high tempo game, and they were trying to pass the ball. And I'm all for kind of the smaller teams, the kind of lesser teams, kind of trying to play football, because it's so easy to take that more direct approach to the game as well. So yeah.
And do you think? I mean, there was probably a criticism of last season when teams had a go at us, we would usually struggle with it, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and I think what this season's proven is that we're more of a team now. We seem to be more together, so we're more resilient. There's some stats out there that we've picked up more points than most others from losing positions, so that's a kind of positive. If we do go behind, that we can actually get back in the game and our heads don't go down, which if we go back 2 or 3 seasons, that's all that used to happen. We conceded, and we either conceded more or we got beat. Either we found a way to get beat. So I think that's a positive thing overall. But yeah.
And as Neil touched on there, we conceded, as seems to be the way. It was a bit of a rubbish goal, really, to kind of give away. Do you think we could have done better on that one, Craig?
I think so, but I mean, looking back at it, the only kind of goal that was half decent really was McGeady's. The defence for both sides was a bit suspect and got stretched multiple times. It did get quite frantic in the end, somewhat end to end. Not to sound too much of a happy clapper, but the most important thing for me in respect of that game was winning rather than performance. I think if we played better than we did and say, look, we came away with a 1-1 draw, I think people would have been absolutely irate about it. So I think, yeah, look, we can dwell on the negatives in that respect, but we didn't play well. Rochdale were very much up for it. I thought they were much, much better than they were last season. But look, we came away kind of unscathed, and it's another 3 points in the bag.
So what would prove to be the winner came in the 56th minute. Luke O'Nien again bombing down the right-hand side. Deep cross in. Funnily enough, McGeady was the one heading it down to Wyke. And as you kind of mentioned earlier, Simon, Wyke looks a different beast this season, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. It was good for him to get that goal. Obviously, he scored in the League Cup tie as well. But it's good for strikers to score goals, that kind of thing. He's got a bit of a cult hero thing going on as well, Charlie White, Big Charles. I like that. And it's good. He fulfills the role of centre-forward very well. And he could score more. He could be a better finisher. But he's doing all right. And he does look a different player, a better player than he did last season.
Do you think he's the Wyke we thought we'd signed?
I think that's a very good way of putting it, actually. Yeah, I think that's exactly the player that he is now. Yeah, he's a big beast and that kind of thing. And basically, that's what he was brought to do, to be the sort of difficult big centre forward pivot of the attacking formations and that kind of thing. And he does look like that player now. And he's just moving a bit better. I think he's a little bit sleeker in his shirt and that kind of thing this season. And that's he looks the part now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with obviously White came in for McNulty, but I think it'd be interesting when McNulty's back, because I think it'd be harsh to take Wyke out, but then at the same time, you want to stick with this 4-2-3-1 that's been working. But I would really like to see Wyke up with McNulty.
I think they can cause teams a real handful, especially, for example, if we played a team yesterday where every time we went forward we seemed to frighten the the life out of that back four. I think if we had somebody like McNulty running in behind them as well, I mean, 3-1 could have been, say, 6 or 7-1.
Yeah. So we still had to get through a shaky final 20 minutes or so with John McLaughlin making some brilliant save to keep us to 3 points. But again, similar to the Pompey game, we stuck in and we held on for another massive 3 points. Are we starting to see somewhat of a resilience and a toughness in this team? I suppose it's not just the fact that we're holding on in the final 15 or 20, even when, if we go behind or we're pegged back by a stupid goal or a goal against the run of play, we're dusting ourselves down and we're either getting ourselves back in it or we're going on to get the winner. It's something I guess you mentioned earlier, Neil, we're looking more like a team.
Yep.
So do you think that's kind of helping in those situations as well?
I think so, yeah. I think as a squad, as a team, we're just more settled. So we're managing games better. Yes, we're conceding goals, but we seem to be managing games better in terms of, you mentioned McLaughlin at the last 15, 20 minutes, perhaps last season, that would have ended 2-2. Not down to John McLaughlin, but generally we would have found a way to kind of concede another goal. So, but yeah, I think, and that may be linked to Ledbitter's kind of captaincy as well. And there was one time, I think it was 09, give the ball away, and it was one of the biggest rollickings I've ever seen. That I give him, it was about the 80th minute down at Rochdale. So yeah, I think that more steel and more kind of resilience is in this team compared to last season. And for all everyone talks about quality and goals and clean sheets, it could be that resilience that gets us the results that we missed last season. So,
and I guess a big thing as well is we've already touched on the same lineup. And I think it's well documented that settled lineups do much better, basically. And I think the back four, I mean, admittedly, the left back position is still a question mark over that. But I think certainly that settled back two, which we touched on last week in the podcast. I think that's clearly just making a massive difference, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I was going to bring up the shift from 3 to 4. You can see the attraction for Jack Ross of the 3 because, theoretically it's a more attacking formation. But they've just looked so much more comfortable in a back 4. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves in the timeline and that sort of thing. But I thought another massive positive from yesterday was Denver Hume, who in a back 4 came in and suddenly looked like the young kid who everyone was so excited about last season, rather than looking a bit without much idea what he was supposed to be doing when he was a wing back. So that was a big positive as well. So yeah, I think the back 4 suits him, and definitely I fully agree with the back 2 because they at the minute have got the shirts and they for at the minute that looks good. That centre back pairing.
Do you think Jack Ross deserves a little bit of credit? Because obviously we stuck with the back 3 in pre-season, and I think I mentioned before we can see why we did it. Like you mentioned, it's more attacking in theory. He did it at St Mirren and he got success with it. So for him to essentially admit that he was wrong by sticking with his back 4, because I know in the past he said, well, it just gives us options to use his back 3, but we haven't really used it.
Yeah, I think people have him pegged as this stubborn man who's really set in his ways, and I don't think that's the case. Maybe that's his demeanour that he gives off. I know obviously Nick Barnes last week said he kind of challenged him on the formation and he got quite defensive around it.
Yeah.
But from kind of the change in formation, it's a no-brainer that playing a back 4 that we are definitely much more settled, we're much more comfortable. But I mean, I think, for example, there will be opportune moments again going forward the season where we may drop to a 3 again, or injuries, things like that, where the squad will somewhat become stretched. But it's good that he does have a plan B, and I don't think he'd be afraid to change it again. I think we've got a good squad depth now where we can move things around and again, obviously try and implement that. And there's no reason why we can't be a success. I mean, playing a back 4 over the course of the past couple of games, like Neil's mentioned, I think if you go back to last season, we looked frightened every time a team came at us, and there was so many games where we conceded the last kind of few minute goals, Scunthorpe away, Oxford away, and they looked like they were getting bullied. And I'm not seeing any of that at the moment. Even when teams are pressing or pushing at us, there's no kind of fear. Everybody knows what they're doing, and nobody's afraid to basically dig somebody out. Like you said about the Rollick and 09 got, they're all prepared to challenge each other. And I think in terms of where we are now, I think now's the real opportune moment to kick on. So I'm delighted for Jack Ross that it's going well, because you go back a couple of weeks and I think everybody had an X across his head, didn't they?
Definitely, and it's amazing. I suppose it's football, really, isn't it? But it's amazing how that's all gone now.
It's that cliche though, isn't it? You know, football, a week in football is a long time. I mean, now obviously 2 weeks or so ago,
It's a very long time.
I was going to say it's a very long time, and everybody. Well, it's not everybody. That's not fair. That's not a true reflection. But a lot of people had criticism, and that seemed to has died down. I mean, granted, next week, who knows what could happen? But yeah, I'm pleased for him. I think it's going well.
Yeah, I suppose it's the double-edged sword, isn't it, of the relentless EFL schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You can lose a game, but then know you've got 2 within the next week, and then all of a sudden, if you win both those games, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But you might win a game and then lose the next 2, and then all of a sudden it's game over. I mean, I was looking at when Pompey lost their last game, looking at the Twitter comments. All of a sudden, Kenny Jackett now it's Jagged out.
Yeah.
Which seems so insane.
No, it doesn't even take a defeat. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Because the Kenny Jackett thing came off after they dropped the 3-1
Right,
lead
yeah.
against 9-man
Sure.
Coventry.
Yeah.
And Jack Ross was under pressure for drawing 2 games 1-1. Now, the 1-1 thing, I know that's a different thing. And
That's a narrative in
it was
itself.
actually, credit where it's due, Simon Pride from Total Sport BBC, who pointed out yesterday that every single game so far this season has featured at least a bit of 1-1.
Yeah.
They're addicted to it, aren't they?
Yeah.
They've got to have their fix of 1-1
Because then
at
they
some
feel
point during the game.
comfortable. Yeah.
So, but just to put it back into context, so first 2 games of the season were drawn. One was a tough away game. It wasn't very good on the first day of the season. Fair enough. And all of a sudden the manager's under pressure. I know there's huge context back to last season, and now he's not under pressure. Once they decided that they were sticking with Jack Ross for this season, then it was. I thought it was faintly ridiculous to be getting the pitchforks out after 2 1-1 draws.
Yeah, but I think it just goes to show that no one is immune to it.
Definitely
because
not.
pre-season, some people had Pompey to win the league, and now it's Jagged out, which is just football, I guess. So between the Rochdale game and the Wimbledon game, just to stick with the timeline that we're on, there was some fairly big news making the rounds, I think it's fair to say, which we will come on to later, so stick around for that. But in purely football terms, it was all about keeping the momentum. And as I mentioned, going up against pre-season relegation candidates at home, having 1-2 on the bounce, you could almost see a shock defeat coming, couldn't you?
Oh, it would have been very Sunderland if
Yeah.
we got beat 1-0 yesterday. It would have been the hallmark of, Adi Akinbaye hadn't scored in 15 years or whatever. And then, lo and behold, 1-0 against Sunderland. But no, I think what everyone has done well is they haven't let that cloud over or impact anything that's going on. Jack Ross has remained certainly professional enough when he's been questioned on it to just say, look, it's not my business, don't know what's going on, haven't met them. And it's good that everyone's just remained grounded because it is really, really exciting news.
Yeah.
It could impact pretty much everybody's future in that team. Players, they may come and go. They may not like the manager.
Yeah.
But, whilst we don't know what's going on, everybody's got a job to do. So it was important to make sure that we really did dig in and keep that momentum going yesterday.
I mean, we'll talk about, obviously, the takeover news later on, where we can, because, as of recording anyway, nothing is set in stone, nothing is confirmed.
Yes.
So we can have our 10 or 15 minutes or so of let's all get excited. But as of yesterday's game, again, same 11, pretty standard now. Really doesn't give us a lot to talk about because we used to always talk about back 3, back 4, who's going to play. Now it's just all settled. So what's obviously grabbing all the headlines is Chris Maguire's hat-trick, and rightfully so. I thought the first goal in particular was lovely. It's always brilliant to see a player take the match ball after a win. But Neil, we were chatting before we started recording, and you said something potentially controversial. You think he can still offer us a bit more?
Yeah, I think if you look at his performance yesterday, it was a pretty good all-round performance. His first, particularly the timing of the first goal, settled the crowd, and I turned up as kind of elated as anyone about the takeover news, and you could tell, and even the ticket office was kind of accusing my. You could tell there's a couple of thousand there yesterday based on the apparent news that's kind of upcoming. And the timing of that first goal was important to kind of get there. If that was Wimbledon scoring, then it could have kind of regated into something else. So I think the timing of the goal, the quality of the finish was superb. What followed was 2 fairly fortunate kind of deflective goals. But I think the thing with Chris Maguire, I went to Accrington Stanley and Rochdale, and when you go to these smaller grounds, you kind of get closer to the action and you can analyse kind of individuals more. And I just still think his work rate could be a little bit better. And I don't subscribe to these theories that he's fat, overweight, unfit, whatever. I think he would have been found out by now. But I think when he's up for it, he gets involved in the game. When he's not, he waits for the game to kind of involve him. And that would go for Grigg for me as well. I think Grigg's got obviously huge confidence issues, but I think Grigg needs to kind of look at Maguire, look at Wyke, and see how they've kind of got into the game as opposed to kind of waiting for the chances to come along. It's not a criticism of Maguire. I think it's just an expectation that I know there's a really good player in there, and we just need to see it more and more.
I suppose as well, though, you mentioned earlier Wyke's becoming somewhat of a cult hero. I think Maguire's definitely there already, isn't he? With the king and all that kind of stuff. So do you think that we almost look at him with rose-tinted glasses sometimes?
Sometimes.
Just playing devil's advocate here, by the way.
Certainly Graham, extra pod host.
Yeah.
I mean, he's besotted with
He fancies him a little.
with Chris Maguire as well. He's a handsome man, isn't he?
Yes.
No, you know what? Again, I agree with that. I think even if you notice Jack Ross's post-match comments yesterday, he praised him, but he said, look, we need to kind of manage him in that respect, and we need to make sure that we get the best out of him, because you get flashes of brilliance like that from him yesterday. That first goal was absolutely ridiculous. But there is often times where the game can just go past him. There can be moments of petulance where, he'll kick the ball away or he'll get involved in unnecessary scrapes. Thankfully, we haven't seen that too much this season. Even the Portsmouth game where, he seemed to rile him up an awful lot last season. But he seems to have kicked on an awful lot. I think he knows now that he has an added responsibility. And the fact that he's starting a lot more games, he's involved an awful lot more. He knows that there is an expectancy on him to deliver. Certainly happy that with his return, 4 goals in 2 home games. But again, I'm going back to being a happy clapper. I can't have any criticisms for anyone in that performance yesterday.
I suppose he's a bit of a luxury player, certainly at this level. And again, devil's advocate, but got to. Could you throw that same accusation at McGeady sometimes as well?
I suppose you could, but you mentioned the word level there, and I think for this level, they're both extremely good players. Just to sort of focus on Chris Maguire, I'm fascinated by Chris Maguire. He's an interesting character, that kind of thing. I totally get your point, Neil, about work rate and that kind of thing. It's a valid point, but I think sometimes people just are who they are. And the fact is, if Chris Maguire was the player that he is with an exceptional work rate, he wouldn't be playing in League One. He'd be playing a lot higher than that. Sometimes people just are who they are. And it was a good day for him yesterday. He walks off with the match ball, that kind of thing. The finish of the first goal was exceptional. I think he's probably the only person at the club who would have done that finish and that sort of thing when he's clean through. Also, I like how when he got subbed off, which I thought was a good decision by Jack Ross, actually, once he's got his hat-trick and that kind of thing, take him off, get some fresh legs on, that sort of thing. And now the new rule where you can just run off the side of the pitch. And I love that he went back to his default position of shithousery and cut the corner at the end. And that was so Chris Maguire. And I love that as well. Look, he is who he is. And I totally get the thing about the work rate. But I think Chris Maguire, he's not sure how old Chris Maguire is, late 20s, early 30s, that kind of thing. He's not going to change. No. That's who he is. And I think he's a player who fans of clubs are going to enjoy if he plays for your club.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, personally, I wouldn't have him any other way.
I think he'd get into every single team in this league.
Oh, comfortably.
Every single team. Him and McGeady, in fairness. I think there must be a lot of teams looking at us. I mean, going back to a different issue, Andy Holt, the Accrington chairman, had mentioned the other day on Twitter about the fact that we had the luxury to bring McGeady off the bench. Yeah. Obviously, we'll not touch on the rest of his comments, but there must be a lot of clubs who look at us and think, how on earth can you basically afford to have that in your team? How can you have so much talent? And that does set us apart at times. So I think, just again, kind of touching on Simon's comments, he's not going to change. I mean, he is what he is. But again, I suppose it's one of them, whilst everything's going right, we should celebrate it, we should enjoy it.
Definitely. And for me, Maguire encapsulates our playoffs, our semi-final against Portsmouth.
Yeah.
I think him, obviously that volley won us the game, but in terms of shithousery, him kind of getting in Naylor's face in the away game, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it was those games, it might have been the late games, but he goes up against Burgess, who's about a foot taller than him, and just laughs in his face. And I think that's what we've needed, especially like, when you're Sunderland and you're scalping, everyone's coming to have a go at you. You need some players in that side who are like, come on then.
He must be horrible at play against. He is like a little worky ticket, the type.
I'd love it if he was mic'd up.
Yeah.
Wow. Can you imagine?
I think he's the type of bloke you see on a night out, and he's sort of the one who would be running his mouth tight, and he seems to just
awful.
Really kind of explode into a situation.
I'd probably hate him on a night out.
You would, but if he's your mate, then if he's your football player, you're going to back him to the end of the earth, aren't you? It's kind of like that Craig Bellamy type persona. Everyone hates him, or El Hadj Diouf, one of those sorts of players. But if he's in your team, brilliant.
Yeah. Well, back to the game. Again, we conceded an equaliser, this time against the run of play. Luke O'Nien losing his man at the back post for, again, another rubbish goal to concede. Jack Ross has mentioned clean sheets. Obviously, that's the defender in him. Should we be concerned about the lack of clean sheets so far this season?
Absolutely. And it'll be doing the manager's head in completely, and the goalkeeper's head, I would have thought as well. He looked really angry when that goal went in, John McLaughlin. Yeah, it is. This is a happy podcast. That things are going well, that kind of thing. Results are coming in. It's all good. But it will be really annoying the coaching staff that they haven't kept a clean sheet this season. Because if you're going to get promoted, if you're going to certainly go automatic and that kind of thing, which I think everyone hopes Sunderland will this year, you need to keep clean sheets. I think Jack Ross is a big man for statistics and that sort of thing, and I think he even trotted one out saying sort of the average, you need sort of 18, 19 clean sheets a season and stuff like that. He'll be concerned by it, but obviously if you're picking up the points, not that concerned at the moment.
I think the frustrating thing is that they're all different goals. We're not conceding every goal from a set piece. We're not kind of getting caught behind the back. They're all just kind of different goals. So it's kind of, as a manager or coach, I'm not sure how you kind of tackle that in terms of, I'm sure they break the goals down and see how they could stamp them out. But I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It generally makes the headlines when you're conceding all your goals in the same way, whereas we just seem to find ways of conceding goals, different ways of conceding goals at the moment. So, but yeah, I think again it just does wonders for the confidence, doesn't it? To kind of win games, but also see kept a clean sheet as well. It just adds to that momentum. So I'm sure it's something that they're working on to get right. But yeah, I think O'Nien is. Reaction yesterday suggested that he knew he was for fault, and that's good in a way. It's glad to see that kind of players are disappointed and hold their hands up to say, well, yeah, it's my fault.
Could you maybe blame yesterday on the fact that, we were dominating, really, weren't we? It came really against the run of play. Do you think people had just switched off because we were pressing? I felt when we were 1-0 up, it was going to be the case of, right, how many we're going to put past these today? And then all of a sudden when they get in from absolutely nothing, the real first effort of the game. It's kind of like Groundhog Day again, isn't it? But yeah, I think O'Nien straight away was the first to put his hands up and say, look, I'm to blame. I know a few people said maybe McLaughlin should have done better, but it happened fairly quick. Either stop the cross or make the challenge in the box.
Well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think, because again, the Rochdale goal was very similar. It was a cross to nothing, really. Should we be more focusing on stopping these crosses?
Yes. Somebody pointed that out on Twitter yesterday. That nobody really tried too hard to stop the cross yesterday, and I think that's definitely an area of concern as well.
Because if you're an opposition side and you look at our last two games, you're just going to look at that and think, just get crosses in the box because they panic. Is that fair?
I would say so. To be honest, it was one of them where it happened that quick. I think even Willis and Ozturk were looking at each other thinking, how on earth has this come about?
Yeah.
They were all surprised.
Is that not a concern though?
I think so.
Should they not know?
Certainly. In terms of cutting out that cross, I'd have to see it back again. I know McGeady was obviously down in that area. Could he have done anything? Maybe Denver Hume have got closer to the man before it came in, but look, it's the issue being is obviously it's the fact that we've mentioned now that we need an X amount of clean sheets, and I think that is going to be on everybody's mind. I think in terms of that back line, they've got to think now every single game, like, look, we've got to start making sure that we get these on the board, because that was the issue last season. I think, what was it? It was 3 clean sheets in our opening 15 games, something like that. That's pretty poor when you think, especially the calibre of strikers that we're going against in this league. No disrespect to any of these teams, but How many games did we have last season, or even at the start of this season, where we've said, well, if that felt like McGeady, we're 1-0 up now. If somebody's bladed over the bar, or if it's gone wide or anything like that. So, yeah, I think maybe they can question each other. I'd rather not them have it dwelling on them too much, where it's going to become too much of an issue, where the shit's scared to come out on the pitch and they're panicking every time that the ball's coming into the box. But maybe it does need addressing in training.
Well, so every week or after every game, we put out on the Twitter asking for 3-word reviews from the listeners, and we've got a few to kind of talk about, which I think bring up some interesting conversations. So Snap Smile, 3-word review was delighted for Denver. I know you mentioned Denver Hume earlier, Simon. Is there a question mark still over the left back spot, or do you think now that was probably going to be sticking to this back four, do you think Denver Hume could cement that down?
He could. He did himself no world of good yesterday, and I was just delighted for him that he came in and he gave what I thought was a very good performance. 7 out of 10 and above performance yesterday, and I think he needed that. He might well be the first choice left back going forward if it's a back four, but they're still looking to bring in a left back. It's still very much their intention to bring in a left back before the transfer window closes. So it depends who that person is, providing that they get him and that kind of thing. But yeah, that it was one. Chris Maguire gets the headlines, but I think it was one of the feel-good stories yesterday was Denver Hume's performance, because after really struggling at the start of the season, I thought he was very good yesterday.
Yeah, I did feel a bit sorry for him after the Oxford game, because obviously we're doing this back three, and him and Flanagan on the left they just didn't look comfortable at all, and I think Denver got a lot of the brunt of that. I thought.
Yeah, I think, not to throw anybody under the bus, but it always seems to be the local boys who become
it's weird,
the
isn't it?
scapegoats.
Yeah,
it's always been George Honeyman. I mean, Christ, Jordan Henderson even got it for a little while, and I don't want that to be Denver Hume, because he looked shot to bits when he came off the pitch against Oxford. And a lot of people had question marks over him, which is a shame, because, coming off the back end of last season, everybody had him held in the highest regard to say this lad's going to be, a massive, massive part in us hopefully getting promoted. He signs a new contract, so it's a great feel-good factor around. And then after day one, where it doesn't quite go to plan, then people are starting to somewhat give him a bit of shit. But I was impressed with him yesterday in a game when he came on against Portsmouth for like that last 10. He was throwing.
I think he needed that, didn't he?
Yeah, he was throwing himself into things, and yesterday he looked really, really confident. Even where there was a couple of times where maybe a straight pass or anything like that, he didn't let it impact him or affect his game. And to be fair, that's quite telling of the entire team. I think yesterday it could have gone, sour when they equalised, but listen, everyone just kicked on, and I think Denver Hume, in fairness, it's his spot for the moment until we sign, obviously, cover for him. But look, we need two players in every position, so I hope that whoever we bring in, regardless of who they are, whether it's a loan signing or whatever league they've played in, I'd still like Denver Hume to have that position. I'd still like him for the long term, because I feel there's a really good talent in there, and I think, the more he kicks on, he could be another player that we're talking about who could go for a lot of money in the future.
Well, that's the thing, and I think we've talked about before the transfer, I guess, philosophy that we need to have is to try and build these players, and then, like you say, sell them on for a big fee, because he's cost us nothing. So for me to kind of just have him on the bench just seems a waste. I think we need to give these players time.
I'd say let's not forget as well. I mean, we have played some pretty difficult teams so far this season. Portsmouth, okay, they've had a bit of a shaky start, admittedly, but they'll be up there. Ipswich are doing incredibly well. I mean, even Wimbledon yesterday, okay, granted they weren't very good. They gave Ipswich a good game the other night as well. But this is his first real stint in that team besides the injury last season. He's still a young kid. He's only played, 25 games or something like that, competitive so far. And I think people need to maybe appreciate that sometimes. Look, if things aren't going to plan, don't dig him out and throw him under the bus. Just get behind him, because yesterday, like I said again, it's the happy clapper routine. But I had no complaints about anything. I thought the fans were absolutely spot on when things weren't going to plan, passes going astray, things like that. Backed them, and it was good. It was refreshing to see them trying different things, and if it wasn't coming off, that they didn't let it get to them. And I thought Denver Hume yesterday, I thought it was very, very impressive.
I thought it was clever management from Ross to pick that game yesterday to put him back in. I think he could have potentially put him back in against Rochdale, but looking at Rochdale's movement and kind of their threat at home, if something went wrong in the first 5-10 minutes, it could have been pressure on Hume again. So I think yesterday, kind of Wimbledon at home, potential relegation fodder in terms of the end of the season. I think it was just a nice game for Hume. I think he was probably as confident going out there saying, yeah, we're playing a lesser team. Let's see if I can get forward. And I think his best work yesterday, he did nothing wrong at all defensively. The only thing you could say, he lost possession, but at the time he was going forwards, which that's all you can ask of a full-back in possession to try and get forward and create some play. So yeah, I think it was clever for Ross to kind of to hold that off. And I mean, Conor McLaughlin, he's had some stick, but he hasn't really played in his kind of home position for any run of games. So I think it was the right time to take him out, but also the right game for Hume to come back in as well.
So that kind of leads on to the next 3-word review, if you like. It's another player who's perhaps not done what we'd hoped. This was Conor Mac _10 that posted Greg almost scored, and I think we've all seen the chance. A confident Greg puts that away. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I was gutted from yesterday because that chance in particular, he'd done all of the hard work. And you're just waiting for the net to bulge, and then we can finally say, look, we finally got the Will Grigg that we expected. And it's just not happening, isn't it?
Because the crowd even cheered before it even, everyone thought that was going in.
I mean, he had 2 really good chances. Obviously, the one that Wyke knocked down from as well, and he was maybe a yard away, a few inches. But for some reason, at this moment, is he going to turn into a Danny Graham, Josie Altidore type? I certainly hope not, because there is definitely a player in there.
Absolutely.
The one from the White knockdown actually would concern me more, to be honest, because just in striker's instinct, that was a walking goal. That should have been, keeper was going the other way, would have been nowhere near it, and Will Grigg in the past, and a 6-yard box poacher, that's an easy goal. That you anticipate what's going to happen there, and he was on his heels. He didn't get where he should have been. That sort of thing. The other chance was a terrible miss, but even strikers and managers will tell you he got into the position, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. But the fact he got into the position was all right. The first one, the White knockdown one, was the one that sort of concerned me and made me think that he is really short of confidence, because I think normally if he was on his game, that would have been meat and drink, and he just would have been on the end of that, and it just, instinct isn't quite there at the moment. And I think at this point for Sunderland, when it's over the 1-1 draw start and that kind of thing, I think Will Grigg scoring a goal or 2 is possibly now the cherry on top of the cake. That's the last thing that they need to fall into place now at this point.
So what do you do as Jack Ross? Because we've just talked about Denver Hume. He brought him back in for the Wimbledon game. He brought him on for the last 10 minutes of the Portsmouth game, just to kind of build that confidence up. I think it looks like he's doing something quite similar with Greg. Obviously, Wyke starting, he's bringing Greg on for the last 25-30 minutes. I think it would have been a fair presumption that he should have got a goal yesterday, or could have got a goal yesterday, which was obviously the idea. What do you do?
You play him at Burnley to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Get some miles on the clock, that kind of thing. It's going to be a tough game. Look, I mean, it will probably be Sunderland's second team against Burnley's second team, but still, you play him, and you just got to hope that at some point...
He just needs one in off the bum.
It's the classic one in off the arse, isn't it, basically? Yeah. And you hope that will happen at some point too.
Yeah, well, going on to more optimistic 3-word review, Jaybird13 has put champions-esque performance. Pretty big statement after 5 games, but is it something to talk about?
I think you've got to look at the opposition yesterday in terms of kind of on paper and kind of how it panned out. I think the opposition was all due respect to Wimbledon. I thought they were fairly poor in terms of attacking. There was one time when Wyke kind of sped past the centre half down the wing, and I just thought, that
doesn't happen.
This is the level of Wimbledon, and again, I appreciate the small club, limited budget, and so on. But I think it's difficult to say champions-esque against. If we go to Peterborough next week and put in a similar performance result, then perhaps you can start talking about kind of more positive things. But I think prefer to stay a little bit more grounded now, based on a home win against Wimbledon.
But do you think automatics is possible, or what are your expectations? Are you thinking playoffs again?
No, I think we need to be top two. If it's not looking like top two towards, then obviously things are going to go quite sour. I put something in an article recently that at the end of October I think we'll be top two, and I think we'll be difficult to kind of displace from that at that point. Whether that's me being really optimistic, but I just think the feeling around the club and the feeling around the team and how settled the squad is compared to last season. There was players in there that were obviously have now been moved on that we don't know behind the scenes, and I'm sure they were all kind of fine, but I'm guessing the rest of the squad knew that those players were on the way, whereas this squad that we've got now is completely the squad that he wants and kind of should take us forward. And yeah, I'll put it on a recording now that I think we'll go for at least top two. But whether yesterday was champion-esque performance, I think you've got to look at the opposition as well.
I don't think you're going to get a fair kind of idea of what is going to be happening, like you said, until around about October time. We were pretty much here this time last season, I think, when we'd beat Scunthorpe, and we said we're going to blow every single team away. And then we hit that sticky patch, a couple of draws, defeated Burton and things like that. So I think the most important thing at this stage is literally just take each game as they come. The reality is we're not going to win every single game. There is going to be games where, we're going to be throwing everything at it and things aren't going to come off. The Oxford game is the prime example for that. But I think at this stage, we have to be targeting to get out this league at this time. I mean, last season, maybe you can forgive it somewhat because of the turmoil that the club was in, but the fact that things are now going incredibly well, certainly off the pitch, but I feel like we've had to start the season a little more it was more difficult start for us than maybe other teams because of the Wembley hangover that we've had, and I don't think people have really got over that until maybe about now. And it was the first time yesterday, I think, where you've seen people coming away from the match and really enjoying themselves again and just saying, look, let's put that one to bed. And maybe do something again this season where we can be looking back, say, 5-10 years from now and saying, do you remember that season back in League One where we've enjoyed it and we've steamrolled teams? But yesterday was the first good sign. I thought that, even at 1-1, I never once thought yesterday that we were not going to win that game. I think everybody had that about us, thinking, right, okay, listen, we'll just find another way to get through them. But we've got tough games coming up. Peterborough away next week is obviously the next big challenge. And I think if we go down there and if we do get 3 points, then people will start looking at us and go, right, these are the real deal.
Sorry, Neil, go ahead.
And then Burton, Rotherham at home are kind of two big home games as well in terms of Rotherham, again, one of the kind of perhaps favourites to kind of go straight back up. There was just a thing on Match of the Day last night. I think they were talking about the kind of how Liverpool have started. They've just kind of started where they left off last season, and there was a mention of Alex Ferguson's Man United teams. Now I'm not comparing the two teams, but they talked about how he was happy to be there and thereabouts until maybe Christmas, just after Christmas, and then Ferguson's teams just started blowing teams away and kind of went on big runs. And I think we may see that as it get around Christmas, the depth in our squad, when other teams are perhaps struggling to get a kind of first team 11 out, you'll see our squad coming to its own and kind of power on from there. So I think so long as we kind of top two come Christmas, I can't see us going anywhere but kind of upwards in that respect.
So. I mean, I think if you look at Luton last season as well, they're a prime example. I think they had maybe 3 or 4 points after the first few games, and they were literally in nobody's discussion for promotion, were they?
I think they were 14th at the end of September last year.
Then all of a sudden they put 25 games unbeaten or something like that, and they weren't the most fashionable of teams. They didn't necessarily always play the greatest football. There was a couple of 1-0s in there, but it was just that momentum. They just kept going.
Yeah.
They just had that belief.
They were a proper team in the sense that they were very together.
And I'm starting to feel that now about us as well. And that's the most promising, reassuring thing. So whilst we are keeping this, the settled squad, the settled lineup at the moment, I think those on the bench, Dylan McGeoch, George Dobson, for example, they're going to have to patiently wait their turn, but they're going to get it because of the amount of games that we've got. Obviously, we've still got the whatever the hell the checker trade's called this season, the leasing.com trophy. But you know what? I'd be over the moon if we got put out of both competitions as soon as we can, so we can just concentrate on the league. I never want to see Wembley again after last season.
You mentioned McGeoch and Dobson there, and again on Twitter we put out some questions for the listeners to give us their responses and for us to kind of chat about as well. and one of them was our best centre midfielder pairing. Your thoughts? We had one furious man who thought there's no need to debate it because we're winning, and why would you change it? Does he have a point, Simon, or can someone like George Dobson feel quite harshly done by for not being in the team?
I think it's possible for everything you've said to actually be correct.
Yeah.
So I think George Dobson probably can feel a little hard done by. Not seen enough of him to make a judgment as yet, but he was one of the brighter spots on the opening day and that kind of thing. But at the minute, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It looks like the two of them complement each other quite well. They're both quite deep lying. That's the thing that you'd say. But now that Grant is back in the team, for league games, for the important games, I don't see Grant not being in the team. So it's going to be him and someone else. And at the moment, Max Power seems to complement him quite well. It gives them a good, strong shield. So at the moment, Mr. Furious is probably spot on with that, yeah.
And you would imagine as well, maybe getting towards Christmas time, Leadbitter might struggle to do 2 games in a week.
Absolutely. Look, I'm still actually quite a fan of McGeoch. I think he's a very, very good footballer. But it just seems that circumstances don't seem to fall in his favour during his time at Sunderland.
It was me that kind of that put that question out, who's our best centre midfield. And I guess what I was thinking is the other, if you look at around the team, Denver Hume left back, if he's going to kind of stake his claim now, I think the only kind of where we've got major competition and where things could possibly change would be those centre midfield berths. So I wasn't suggesting that the current pairing aren't the best pairing, and certainly they're the most settled at the moment. But I think there will be opportunities for McGeoch. As you've mentioned, Simon, he seems to pick up knocks at the wrong times, or other players seem to be ahead of him for whatever reason. But yeah, I think, again, come Christmas, there will have to be changes. And I don't subscribe with this kind of Leadbitter, if he has a bad game, he's lost his legs. I think it's kind of a lazy comment that we see often in football. It's kind of often that's the way the game is, or that's the way maybe the mentality of the game or the mentality of the individual. I don't think a professional footballer's legs just go overnight because they've had one bad game, but I think it'd be interesting going forward how he kind of rotates those maybe 4 or 5 centre midfielders in those 2 positions.
I think Leadbitter dispelled that rumour yesterday about everyone saying his legs had gone. I think it was circa 88, 89 minutes where he won the ball back just in front of the dugout.
That's great.
He managed to retain possession, shielded so many players off the ball. And I mean, literally everyone rose straight away to applaud what he'd done. And to be honest, I mean, I think now we're seeing the signing that we expected back in January. His set pieces always look threatening. Yeah. He's carving out a lot of chances. He sprays the ball around, so comfortably. But I think in terms of going back to that question, midweek's now a prime chance for anybody to stake a claim. Going down to Burnley, we're expecting a lot of changes, if not 11 changes. So if George Dobson or Dylan McGeoch is feeling aggrieved about not being in that team, go and do something about it.
Exactly. Right, so a little bit of admin. Competition time. So this week, our friends at Football Bubbles have offered one of our followers the choice of a free bucket or bubble hat. We had hundreds of entrants across Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and I'm delighted to announce that our winner is Hayley Henderson. Congratulations, Hayley. Please DM us with your details. Thank you to all of those who entered. You can check out the full range of Sunderland hats available at footballbubbles.com. Right, so the most aware of the listeners will notice that we've gone 47 minutes and we haven't really touched on the recent news around Sunderland, the takeover news. We did that on purpose. We thought, tell you what, we'll do the football and then we'll kind of go from there. So for anyone unaware, I'll just quickly go over what's been in the news recently. There is news of new investors of Sunderland, John Phelan, Glenn Furman, Rob Platek, and also Michael Dell, who was the founder and CEO of Dell Technologies, are said to be interested in investing in Sunderland Football Club, or at least majority ownership, and then Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven will continue to manage the club on a day-to-day basis. As of recording, nothing is set in stone, nothing is confirmed. You don't want to get too carried away. You look at our neighbours across the river there and what happened earlier, although personally I always thought that was a smokescreen while Rafa Benitez's contract went down, but that's just me. this could be massive news, but I mean, yes, until you see the four of them with Sunderland scarves over their head on the pitch, it's not really a done deal. But how are we feeling about this new news?
Yeah, the initial kind of emotion, it's hard not to be excited in terms of potential billionaires, multiple billionaires taking over your football club. And then, as a few mags pointed out on Twitter, then Ella Short was also an American billionaire, and look what's happened then. So I think the initial excitement is we should enjoy this. We should at least be able to be excited about it. And if it does come off, then fantastic. That was my initial thought. My kind of thoughts after that in terms of how I compute that is kind of what happens going forward. I think financial fair play has its say in terms of can we just make it clear if it is taken over, we're not going to go and buy every player that we need and spend shitloads of money on kind of wages and so on. I'd much prefer to kind of go in the way that we go and the way that Stu Donald and Charlie's kind of made the club more attractive, more sustainable financially, and kind of see what happens. Again, we need to wait for it to pan out. But I think the key thing is that if it does come off, we continue to kind of grow and become that kind of stable club that we once were, if we ever were a stable club. As opposed to, they've got billions of pounds, so what's half a billion pound on transfers over the next 5 years kind of thing. So and my final thought on this is kind of, at the moment I've got a team that I'm fairly proud of and that I know is fighting for the shirt and kind of just normal lads, and there's no one there for kind of the wrong reasons. So kind of if we do grow and become better financially, then kind of what happens to this team as well. I don't know if it's my kind of 35 years of supporting Sunderland, but I've got a team that's now winning games and kind of I'm enjoying it again. So kind of if we do go to the Championship and replace this team and furthermore, then kind of how do we react to that? And there are obviously going to be bumps in the road as well. It's not all going to be kind of they come in, spend lots of money and everything's positive. So, yeah.
I'd like to hear your thoughts, Simon.
Well, start off with, so John Phelan and Robert Platek were there yesterday, weren't they? So they're there. It's probably going to happen, isn't it? Echo what Neil says. I'm sure, actually, Sunderland supporters are a fairly clued in lot. So I'm sure that most people realise, just as Neil said, no matter how much money they've got, it's not going to make a great deal of difference to this season in League One. You're perfectly right to bring up the FFP, or actually the salary cost management protocol as it is in League One. But yes, Sunderland can't go throwing money about even were they minded to do so. So it's not going to make a lot of difference. Obviously, potentially going forward, it's a game changer. And therefore, why not get excited about the possibility of it? But always be grounded, as Neil brought up there, with the fact that Sunderland still have to get promoted under their own steam this season for this to work out, and then the long term to become more interesting and that sort of thing. I went on the website of MSD and did a bit of reading about it the other day, and look, it's all business spiel and that sort of thing, but they're big pushing the idea of like strategic thinking and that kind of thing. And actually, in light of the Ellis Short experience, I think the biggest thing that Sunderland could get out of this is somebody with a clear plan, because that's what the club's not had for over a decade. So, yeah, money's important. Nobody's going to shy away from that. But more than the money, if they can actually bring in people who in business can see 5-10 years ahead, and they can translate that to the arena of football, that's the most important thing that Sunderland could get out of this, more than just pounds, shillings and pence.
Yep.
Craig?
I think, first and foremost, a lot of credit has to go to Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven about this, because whenever there's takeover rumours, whatever football club, it is plastered over the news. It's plastered, in the newspapers, Sky Sports, this, that and the other. Granted, we're not that level of mainstream media anymore because we're League One, and let's be fair, nobody besides us really care about Sunderland Football Club. That's just the reality now. But the fact that this has gone by and it's been so quiet, there's been obviously a lot of conversations, and people have got it pretty much consistently wrong all the time. And the fact that these two, who have had every insult thrown at them, chances, Dell boys, this, that and the other, have managed to attract again, it's not done yet, but they've managed to attract basically a company that manages the wealth for, I think he's the 25th richest man in the world. I mean, that is some achievement. And in terms of what they've done whilst they've been here, a lot of it perhaps has gone unnoticed. They've always said from day one that they've had, kind of an honest idea of what they want to do. If they are looking for investment, they want the right person. Stuart Donald said multiple times he could sell this club to a lot of people who only want to be here for, make a few extra quid and then bugger off. We could have been Bury, we could have been Bolton. But what these two have done is been a massive, massive achievement. And I think Simon's right. Basically, they're here now. They wouldn't have been at this match yesterday for no other reason than basically making sure that they're signing off on this deal. At least that's my opinion. You're right, it's certainly not going to make any difference to this season, but in the long term, I mean, to compete next season, we're probably going to need to spend a penny because the gap between the Championship and League One it's grown bigger and bigger. So I think the fact is, if we can get out of this league and we've got a decent bit of backing, and that these have actually got a plan of what they want to do, something for the long term. Ellis Short was always destined for failure, unfortunately. We can never ever accuse of him not spending the right amount of money, but there just wasn't football people here at that time. I don't think anyway, people who had the club at heart. But if we keep, say, Stuart Donald on board, Charlie Methven, then I think these two will still pretty much be the front face. But the fact is now we're going to have a lot more money. So, kind of touch wood. It shouldn't go wrong. It should not go wrong. I know we could have had this conversation 10 years ago, but no, it's massive, and we can all get excited about it. I want to see them with the scarves above their head. I want to hear the stories of Charlie Methven in Black Cat House having his Wolf of Wall Street moment. But listen, it's been an excellent week for us.
That's every day.
It is. Yeah.
This will all become a film.
I was going to say Netflix are coming back for season 3. I think either for this, but it's been an excellent week for us. Why not have a little bit of excitement about it? It's important to remain grounded because look, our friends up the road, the day after we get beat off Charlton in the playoff final, they're set to become allegedly the richest football club in the world. This, that and the other.
Mbappe was close.
Yeah, I was going to say. So, look, it's important that we do remain grounded and also do realise as well, look, just because we're going to get stinking rich, we're not going to go out and sign Marcus Maddison. I know everybody's desperate, but it's not going to happen. We're not going to spend £5-10 million. It's not there. It's not needed. Yeah. But in the long term, look, we're in a tremendous position now.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven staying on is possibly the biggest part of it. I mean, obviously the money goes without saying, but I think certainly with Stuart, I think the club's got under his skin, and I think you can tell that. And like you said, we need a plan. We need a system, and I think you can look at other clubs for the model. I think you can look at someone like Wolves. The way they did the Championship, they kind of ran away with it and then took to the Premier League like a duck to water. I think even the 3 promoted Premier League sides this season are all in with a shout of staying up. I know Aston Villa did it very differently, but still, I think there's a clear system there. There's a clear way of spending money, and I think that's how we have to do it. Because you look at someone like Stoke in the Championship, who are still struggling, and they've put money into that as well. So yeah, I think it's very exciting. I think it's all about time, and I think with football, because we've had the money, but we've had it at the wrong time with the wrong people. This time it looks like we're going to have the money, but at the right time with the right people. And that could be very, very exciting.
I'm going to be sat here with my red and white blinkers on, but if you look at, say, where we are now, I mean, how many football clubs are going to be in this level of football and still be drawing in 30,000 people, consistently every single week? I mean, the opportunity for anybody to come in and invest, it might be one of those things where they think, look, long term, we'll spend a bit of cash, we'll get back in the Premier League, and maybe they want to sell us on or anything like that. It's all speculative at this stage. But when things go right here, it's a different world, isn't it? When you go back to when we won the league under, say, Roy Keane, Mick McCarthy, Peter Reid, things like that, everybody talked about Sunderland Football Club, for the right reasons, at least then. So I think with these people now on board, granted the Netflix documentary might have helped as well. You hear a lot of rumours about that, but now is an opportune moment for anybody to get involved and take this as far as we can go, because the sky's the limit with us. It always has been, but we just need to make sure that we manage this correctly, because look, we don't want to be here in League One. I don't want to be sat in this room next season talking about playing
Rochdale
against.
away.
Oh, don't, honestly. I don't want to be talking about that. I think there is clubs who can go up, and look, Wolves blew the league apart. They spent an awful lot of money. I mean, look at Charlton, for example. They've just got promoted. They haven't spent an awful lot, but they've got a pretty good plan in terms of what they want to do this season, and they're flying at the moment.
Yeah.
So by keeping football people on board and having a good financial backing, look, you know, it's a much, much better position than say a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. I think what Donald and Metford did when they took over was they kind of spent time understanding the area and understanding the club, and I think that'll be equally as important with any potential takeover. I think Ellis is his kind of silent owner, living miles away. Even when he was in the UK, I think he lived in London. He didn't really take that time. So I'm not necessarily saying the 4 investors will be kind of rocking up in Roker and kind of buying a house in Roker, but I think if they get the right people to kind of do that for them, that's a key thing to keep this kind of momentum of kind of the previous takeover and making sure that kind of goes swimmingly in that respect. In a similar way that John Henry's done at Liverpool. He's got the right people working for him, and he turns up kind of every 8 games and kind of shows his face, but essentially he's got that kind of team in place who know what they're doing below him. Yeah,
That was a big thing with Ellis Shaw. He never had the right people spending his money, never had the right people looking after it at all. And it just, historically, these moments of opportunity, if this deal is done, don't come about all the time. And Sunderland had this with first Drummondville and Ellis Shaw over, 10, 12 years ago. There was a moment of opportunity for Sunderland Football Club, and by and large, they messed it up. And so what I would hope is that if a moment of opportunity does come along, this time they see the pitfalls, this time they don't mess it up, this time you take advantage of a chance that might not come along again.
So to play devil's advocate yet again, and potentially getting carried away a little bit, but I think it's an interesting conversation to have. Say we go up this season, the takeover goes through, everything's great. Does there come a point where there has to be almost casualties within the team and within even the coaching squad, to the point where we need to go up a level to take us to that next level? And I'm thinking, first team that comes to mind is Southampton. They get up in the Premier League. Nigel Adkins does a brilliant job getting them up. They sack him, get him Mauricio Pochettino, and it's a bit like, whoa, what's Adkins done wrong there? But they needed to do that for them to go to the next level, and Pochettino certainly did that. Is there a point where, let's say we get the Championship, where we say, thank you, but now we need to go in a new direction?
Quite possibly, but I think again we'll run the risk of appointing somebody for all the wrong reasons. At least with somebody like Jack Ross at the moment, and I'll be honest, I'm a big fan of Jack Ross. The idea where people are saying, look, we want him out, this, that and the other, we don't really want that about any manager, because if you sack someone, they've failed. And let's be fair, whoever we've had in the past, rightfully speaking, you want them all to succeed. But we've had appointments where, David Moyes came in and he felt he was doing us a favour straight away from day one. It looked like there was no desire to be here. And we don't want that. We don't want to really, kind of back ourselves into that much of a corner again where we're making these appointments. I mean, granted, okay, you can understand Allardyce left for the England job, but I think the reality was he was going to leave anyway because of his unhappiness around the transfer situation. But I think what will be important is trying to at least have a little bit of consistency, because at this stage now, if you look at, say, top end of the Championship and in the Premier League, the money is absolutely ridiculous. So if potential managers or future candidates out there are aware that we've got an awful lot of backing, I think the first thing they'll be saying is, well, look, I need a huge amount of money for this, that and the other. And then you potentially run the risk of ripping up our project and starting again. And that's where we fell really kind of badly in the past, where every single transfer window come August, we were getting rid of half of a team, we're bringing in 12 new signings. It took as far as October or November to kind of get them settled. By that time, we had a new manager who wanted to make his own individual signings, January, August, and lo and behold, you're in that similar situation again. So I'd like to think that by keeping hold of Jack Ross for the long term, I mean, look, who knows? He might take the Scotland job he's been linked with. He might take the Celtic job in the future, again, that he's been linked with. We don't know. But I think it's important to try and keep the model that we've got for as long as we can, because I genuinely believe we can get out this league at the first time of asking now, this season at least. Sorry, of course, forgetting last season. But this season we can get out. And I'm pretty confident that with the right additions and with the right tweaks, that we can at least achieve somewhere like mid-table stability next season. Because look, we're not going to do a double promotion. I think that's quite unheard of these days, unless you plough an awful lot of money. But I think we just need to remain a little bit grounded. And I think, from my personal opinion, we need to try and keep what we've got for as long as we've got. Players, okay, you're always expected turnover, but I think by appointing somebody else, you're just going back to square one.
Get your point. Little bit uncomfortable because I think this is a 3-pint conversation in the pub, really, isn't it? More than anything else. I don't want to anoint Jack Ross as the next Alex Ferguson. I'm a big fan of him, but this is all way down the line and that sort of thing. And I think, Peterborough away is probably more important. Look, I get why you're having the conversation. Players, yes. Management, no. Did Sheffield United sack Chris Wilder? Did Norwich sack Daniel Farker? No, they didn't. I think the Southampton one that you mentioned, which is a very interesting set of circumstances, I think that's almost the exception rather than the rule, because people do it, but I'm not sure it often works. At the minute, looking where Sunderland are, not just because they play in red and white, I think Sunderland should try and do what Sheffield United have done over the last couple of years and that kind of thing. And that's grow organically and get a group of people, coaching staff and players. Players will come and players will go. And if you step up a level, you need to get better players. That's just the way of the world. But let it grow organically. Let it become its own thing, and don't look to just swap things out because you happen to have a bit more in your bank account.
Yeah. Well, for what's worth, completely agree. Norwich have spent 750,000, I think, this season in the Prem. Just thought, interesting conversation to have.
It is an interesting conversation
under the circumstances.
I think we'll maybe be sat here April, May, if we're in the top 2, looking at all things looking good, and if we sat down and said, right, how many of these players are Championship players, then that would be fairly startling, bearing in mind that kind of no one's really came in and took our top performers. Stu Donald's been fairly open in that if the price is right for the right player, then they would be sold. The fact that McGeady, McLaughlin, Maguire, I'm not just picking out all the Macs there, but potentially our best players, the fact that they still here suggests the League One players. So if we were to go up to the Championship, then yeah, I think there'd be a forthright conversation in terms of, well, actually, we've got maybe, I'm not going to say a number of players, but a certain number of players who actually can take us forward, and that needs to be added to. So I think, Craig, your points on continuity and consistency are perfectly right. But if we want to compete at Championship level, then I think we will have that another overhaul of the squad going forwards. But if we can do the Sheffield United thing and have a nucleus of the squad and kind of add 4 or 5 each time as opposed to 13 in, 13 out kind of thing. And if you look at Liverpool and Spurs now, kind of where they want to be just about, they essentially sign one player every window or one player every other window. That's the kind of the golden egg for me, to have that kind of team that I can be proud of over a number of seasons. My little boy's 7 and he's kind of lost. He's forgot about the number of players that he's adored because they've kind of come and gone, and we kind of want that Sheffield United, right? We've got a nucleus, we've got 14, 15 players, we'll shift 3 on and we'll bring 3 in kind of going forward all the way to the Premier League. That's the way I would like it to happen. But
I'm hoping with some of the money that is coming in, though, that something that people haven't discussed is that may allow us to kind of add up the fund in the scouting departments, places like that again, money being pulled back into the academy, because there is a lot of teams in the Championship. Sheffield United are the prime example, they were in there for 1 season, following season they go back up. So, but I look at teams like Preston, for example. They came up from winning the playoffs, and they're always lingering again in the playoffs in a higher division now, and they don't go out and spend an awful lot of money. So I think that's crucial, that people perhaps are aware, like, we have a lot of money, but it doesn't necessarily need to be squandered for that sake. There is an awful lot of talent out there. We just need to make sure that we tap into the appropriate places rather than, say, go somewhere and bring in the next Didier and Dong. Instead, maybe we can go somewhere a little further afield, or perhaps or closer to home, and maybe get someone for a hell of a lot cheaper. But just make sure that we're utilising our resources, because let's be fair, having this academy and things like that on the doorstep, people should be immensely proud to come play for this football club, and they should want to come here for the right reasons. And I think recruiting smart, we're expecting obviously a turnover of players if we go up. That's a no-brainer. But again, just making sure that we manage our expectation levels appropriately, because we can easily get carried away with this now and think, we're billionaires and we're going to be in the Champions League in a few years, but it's very unlikely.
Yeah, I think Farker at Norwich is a really interesting one. He was under real pressure at the beginning. I think he went on a really bad run at one point, but he didn't even go to the Bundesliga, I don't think. I think he went to kind of Bundesliga 2 and picked out 3 or 4 really good players that are now central, and he maybe got a little bit lucky with Pukki as well, but that was kind of a Calvin Phillips kind of signing for them. But other than that, he's got 3 or 4 Germans in there that are kind of the spine of the team now. And again, he was under real pressure at one point when he first took over 6 months in.
I think what's interesting about Norwich is, though, that Stuart Webber's come out and he said even when they were struggling, Farker's job was never under pressure. He always knew he was his man, which I think Donald's done similar thing with Jack Ross. But it's all potentially very exciting, so we'll just have to wait and see. So we'll look ahead now to the next game. Burnley, Wednesday night, Carabao Cup. We expecting 11 changes?
There or thereabouts. Chris Maguire said yesterday, rightfully, that's a bonus game. And for me, it'd be nice to get through, maybe have a fairly decent kind of idea of where we are in terms of going up against what is likely a second-string Burnley side. Can we compete against teams like that? If not, how far away are we? But look, I'm not going to lose any sleep if we get knocked out of that competition, because for me, the Peterborough game next weekend is by far the most important game. So for me, it's about getting minutes under the belt for a lot of players who haven't had the opportunity as of yet. It'll be interesting to see Lee Burge come back in again. I thought he's performed well when he's been called upon in the Cup earlier in the season and pre-season. But yeah, for me, look, it's a dead rubber. If we get beat, if we get knocked out, so be it. It'd be nice to keep a little bit of momentum in terms of the running streak ongoing. But look, Peterborough's the main game.
100%. I think it's part of the punishment that Sunderland have to suffer for being in League One. League Cup, doesn't matter. Not going to win it.
No.
I know Bradford got to the final a few years ago and that kind of thing, but that's like 1 in a million. Not going to win it. Really, it doesn't. Honestly, I still think the trophy's probably a bigger deal than the League Cup this season. And I'm not saying that they should go hell for leather to go back to Wembley in the trophy, but the League Cup, it's just a sad truth of the situation. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Pretty simple then. So any predictions, score predictions? Do we want to lose?
No. We all want to win every single game, don't we? I think it's going to be second string against second string. Who knows? I expect. Look, I think we'll probably get beat. Maybe 2 or 3-0. It'd be nice to get somebody down there, Will Grigg in particular, scoring.
Yeah.
What's more important for me is I'd like to see some good performances in there. I want to see something from Dylan McGeoch and George Dobson if they are involved. I'd like to see Conor McLaughlin come back in and hopefully cement the position he wants to play in, because he's been here, there and everywhere so far, hasn't he? But look, it's an opportunity for the second string players or the people who are there or thereabouts to come knocking on the door and try and get their place back in the team. So for me, I think we'll get beat 2 or 3-0, but I'm honestly not bothered.
I'm not so sure that there will be so many changes. I went to Accrington and I was pleasantly surprised at how strong the team was, and that's maybe the position or the pressure that Ross was under at the time. He's under a lot less pressure, and it's a bonus game now. But I think he may keep some nucleus to the side to try and kind of keep that momentum in terms of kind of what we've gone down the last 4 or 5 games. But yeah, I think whether it's a half-strength side or fully reserve side, I don't think the outcome really matters within the bigger context of the season. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think you're both spot on. Yeah, I think if Sunderland walk off the pitch at Burnley, and some players have put a marker down in the manager's mind and said, "We want to be part of your first 11," then I think that it would be a successful night for Sunderland, regardless of what the score is.
Yep, completely agree. Right, well, Craig, Neil, Simon, thank you very much for coming in. And to the listener, thanks for sticking with us. Bit of a longer one this time, but I think you'll understand given all the circumstances. And we'll be back next week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.